Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard. Today's episode is one that I'm particularly passionate about because I want to challenge one of the most common phrases in basketball. How many times have you heard someone says, that player has a high basketball IQ? Or perhaps they may say, you can't teach basketball IQ. Well, for years, coaches, parents, players have used those phrases to describe athletes who seem to understand the game better than everyone else. Personally, I never coached that way. Not because I believe every player learns at the same pace, because they don't. And not because every player has the same physical ability, well, they don't. But because I believe basketball is a learned game. Nobody's born understanding spacing. Nobody's born recognizing help side defense or know how to read ball screens. Nobody's born making the correct decisions under pressure. Players learn those things. They learn through coaching. They learn through repetition. They learn through guided experiences, through mistakes, through feedback. And they learn by repeatedly solving basketball problems. That's why I don't spend much time asking whether a player has basketball IQ. Instead, I ask a different question. What do I need to teach this player so they recognize the game sooner, make better decisions, and execute more effectively? That question completely changes the role of the coach. Many coaches believe their responsibility is to teach basketball skills. I believe our responsibility is much greater. Our responsibility is to teach players how to use those skills. That's an enormous difference. Teaching a player how to shoot is instruction. Teaching a player when to shoot is coaching. Teaching a player how to pass is an instruction. Teaching a player when not to pass is coaching. Teaching a player how to finish at the rim is instruction. Teaching a player which finish to use against different defenders is coaching. Basketball is not simply a game of executing skills. Basketball is a game of solving problems. Every possession asks a question. What is the defender taking away? Where is the help defender? Where is the advantage? And what is the best solution? Good players don't simply know more skills. They consistently choose the right skill at the right moment. Let's use finishing around the basket as an example. Most coaches teach several different finishes like right hand layup, left hand layup, reverse layup, floater, Euro step, power finish. Those are all important technical skills. But the game never asks players, can you perform a Euro step? The game asks a much better question. Based on what the defender is doing, which finish gives you the greatest chance of scoring? Now we have moved beyond technique. Now we are teaching players how to think. Imagine a straight line between the basketball and the center of the rim. The offensive player's objective is to attack and maintain that line, and the defender's objective is to take it away. Every decision depends on how the defender reacts. If the defender stays behind, one finish may be correct. If the defender recovers to one side, another finish becomes the better choice. If the defender beats the offensive player to the rim, perhaps the correct answer is a floater or a reverse finish or a stride stop or changing directions entirely. Notice something important? We are not teaching four different labs. We are teaching one skill through multiple decisions. The skill stays the same, the situation changes, and the decision changes. And that's exactly what coaching should develop. Our goal is not to create players who know the greatest number of skills. Our goal is to create players who consistently make better basketball decisions. Many people call that basketball IQ. I simply believe it is the result of outstanding teaching, meaningful learning, and thousands of quality repetitions. So perhaps the real question isn't, can basketball IQ be taught? Maybe the better question is, how do great coaches teach players to think? That's exactly what we are going to explore next. So, if our objective is to develop better decision makers, where do we begin? For me, the answer has always been the same. We teach progressively. One of the biggest mistakes coaches make is asking players to solve problems before they have learned the skills required to solve them. Learning should follow a logical progression. Over the years, I have used the same progression whether I'm teaching finishing, shooting, passing, post play, ball screens, transition offense, closeouts, or virtually any other basketball concept. The progression never changes, only the skill changes. The first stage is 1 versus 0. This is where we introduce the new skill. The objective is technical learning. Players learn footwork, body control, balance, movement, timing, ball handling, finishing mechanics. There are no defenders and no need to make any decisions. Player can focus entirely on learning the movement correctly. Technical confidence comes before the decision making. Once player understand the movement, we move to the second stage, which is 1 versus coach. And this is where learning begins to change. The coach now becomes a defender, a soft defender, not to stop the player, but to teach the player. The coach changes positions, shows different defensive angles, takes away one option, leaves another available. Now the player must observe before acting. The player is no longer repeating a movement. The player is reading the game. The movement stays the same. The decision changes. Once players begin making consistent reads, we move to the third stage. 1 versus 1. Controlled advantage. Now we introduce a live defender. However, the offensive player begins with an advantage. The purpose is not to challenge the player as much as possible. The purpose is to challenge the player's decision making while allowing success. So players continue learning. Confidence grows. Reads become quicker. Decisions become more automatic. As players improve, advantages become smaller. Pressure becomes greater. Problems become more realistic. Finally, we arrive at the fourth stage. 1 versus 1 game situation. Now everything comes together. Technique, recognition, decision making, execution, pressure, competition. At this stage, players aren't learning the movement for the first time. They're demonstrating everything they have already learned. And that's an important distinction. Games should confirm learning. Games should not replace teaching. What I love most about this progression is that it works for every basketball skill. Teaching a jump shot, use the same progression. Teaching passing, use the same progression. Teaching finishes, closeouts, post plays, use exactly the same progression. How about ball screens and transition? Use the same progression. The model never changes, only the basketball problem changes. That's why I don't spend much time debating whether basketball IQ exists. I would rather spend my energy creating practices that produce players who recognize sooner, decide faster, and execute better. Because that's our responsibility as coaches. We don't just teach basketball skills, we teach basketball skills to those players, and we want those players to understand how to play the game. We don't simply develop better athletes, we develop better decision making. When players repeatedly learn how to recognize, decide, and execute in the right situations, people often say that player has a high basketball IQ. Well, maybe, or maybe that player simply had a coach who understood how to teach. Well, thank you for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Scoreboard. I want you to remember this. Great coaching isn't measured by how many skills your players know. It is measured by how well your players know when, why, and how to use those skills when the game depends on it.